It was 0437 Earth time when the message came through. A cold transmission, bouncing off the shattered remains of the Europa listening post, encoded in a dying frequency that barely made it through. And yet, every word shook the bones of the Intergalactic Council. The message was clear, brutal, final. Strike once more, we'll erase you. No frills, no diplomats, just a threat, a promise. And it came from one species that wasn't supposed to be capable of such violence anymore. Humanity. Back on Earth, the man behind those words stood silently inside a ruined command bunker in what used to be the Swiss Alps. His name was Callan Ward, commander of the Earth Defense Relays, and unofficially, the last man aliens should have messed with. Callan didn't look like a legend, not anymore. Dirt-covered boots, a frayed black uniform with more patches than cloth, and a permanent line of grime around his eyes from weeks without rest. He wasn't clean. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't a hero by the old world's standards. But he was alive. And in the year 2624, that counted for more than medals ever could. 3 months ago they had come again, the Zix Coalition. A race of biosynthetic worms wrapped in armor so thick it could survive a sun. They had torched the atmosphere over Oslo, burned crops across what remained of New Africa, and disassembled Mars Station like it was made of paper. All this in response to Earth rejecting their trade terms, which of course included slavery. Callan had warned them not to come back. He had sent the first message after Oslo. It wasn't approved by Earth's Puppet Council, but there was no one left to stop him. Half the council was vaporized, the other half defected to the colonies. "Earth is no longer your farm," he had said, but they didn't listen. So this second message? It wasn't a warning. It was a dare. Behind him, the command screens flickered. A technician, barely 19, trembling with fear, stood next to him. Her name was Luma. She had been orphaned in the first wave of attacks and had spent the last 2 years scavenging through the remnants of a shattered Toronto before being picked up by Callan's team. "They'll respond, right?" she asked quietly, eyes wide and haunted. "They always respond." Callan didn't blink. "Let 'em." He turned and walked toward the steel elevator leading to the war deck below. The surviving fleet had docked for maintenance. Old Earth-built dreadnoughts, patched with scrap tech, running on reactors so unstable they could blow at the wrong spark. But they were all he had. And they would be enough. The elevator screeched as it descended. Below, sparks flew from welding bots, humans shouted commands, and half-built drones hovered mid-air, scanning weapons modules. Callan stepped off and was met by Sergeant Rix, his second-in-command. Former street soldier from the Europa uprising, covered in tattoos from every lost battle. "They saw the message," Rix grunted. "One of their scouts just blinked off the system grid. Might have cloaked, might have fled." "Makes no difference," Callan said. "Prepare for retaliation." Rix looked at him for a long second. "You sure, Commander? We got barely 3 warbirds running. If they hit again, we might not have enough left to—" Cullen's eyes hardened. "We're not waiting to survive. We're here to remind them we're still human." He paused. "And if that means bleeding out every last drop to scorch their empire, so be it." Silence passed between them. Not fear, not resignation. Conviction. The kind of silence that grows inside people who've seen too much, lost too much, and decided they'd rather die fighting than kneeling. Callan walked through the hangar, placing a hand on the rusted hull of his flagship. The Remnant. A repurposed mining vessel turned war carrier, armed with plasma coils and an AI system built from scavenged alien code. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't fast, but it had already killed 2 Zix cruisers with half a core and a full crew of maniacs. Humanity had long since given up on peace. Now it was about respect, and if the aliens couldn't offer it willingly, Then Earth would teach it the hard way. The night before the launch felt like the end of the world. Not because the stars had vanished. Those were still there, scattered like broken glass across the blackness. But because of what they were planning to do. What Callan Ward was planning to do. There was no sleep that night. Not for the crews loading missiles onto warbirds held together by welds and old prayers. Not for the scientists triple-checking shield generators held in place by repurposed scrapyard magnets. And definitely not for Callan. He sat alone in his bunk, staring at a chipped photograph that had survived the Oslo burn. His wife, his daughter. Both gone when the sky turned red and their transport ship vanished beneath a swarm of Zix drones. He hadn't cried that day. He hadn't screamed, just burned, quiet and cold from the inside. And now, the burn had purpose. A knock at the door broke the silence. "Enter." Luma stepped in, helmet tucked under her arm. She looked young, too young to be strapping into a cockpit. But no one cared about age anymore. All that mattered was whether you could fight. Survive. "You should see this," she said. Callan stood, following her into the corridor that snaked down to the observation deck. From there, Earth was barely visible, scarred, dusty, ringed by debris from dead satellites and orbital defense platforms. Still, it hung there, stubborn as ever, but that's not what caught his eye. "Contact?" he asked. "Not just contact," Luma whispered. "They brought the dagger." Callan's fists clenched at the name. The Zix dagger wasn't just a warship, it was a symbol. The same flagship that had cracked Europa's defense grid in under 5 minutes. The same one that led the assault on Mars. A ship the size of a city, with a hull that shimmered like a predator's skin. "They're not just responding," Rick said, stepping up behind him. "They're sending a message back." Callan didn't flinch. He took a breath, then turned toward the command bay. "Then it's time we delivered ours in person." By morning, the fleet had launched. 3 Earth-class warbirds, 7 retrofitted cargo haulers turned missile barges, 2 prototype stealth fighters, 1 mining rig equipped with a suicide bomb forged from a collapsed neutron core. And at the center of it all, the Remnant, Callan's ship. The stars blurred past as the fleet moved through slipspace. Inside the bridge of the Remnant, Callan stood at the helm, fingers resting on a cracked console. Every creak of the hull, every tremble in the engine, was a reminder that humanity's time had run out. They weren't fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to die on their feet. Luma's voice cut through the tension. "Dagger is stationary. They're waiting." Of course they were. Arrogant bastards. "Distance?" Callan asked. 4 million clicks. Outside drone range, but we'll be in striking distance in 7 minutes. "Good." He activated the fleet-wide comms. "This is Commander Ward," he said. His voice echoed across every bridge, every cramped quarters, every breathing human soul in that fleet. "You know why we're here. You've lost friends, family, cities. We've been called primitive, weak, disorganized." A pause. "Let them call us that. Let them believe that. Because when this ends, they'll remember only one thing." He glanced at the stars. "That Earth doesn't kneel. We don't beg. We make our stand right here, right now. If we die making the universe remember who we are. And if we survive—" He smiled. Not kindly. "Then we'll show them what happens when you push humans too far." The fleet surged forward. Zix interceptors blinked into range. Sleek, fast, perfect machines of death. But the humans didn't flinch. Remnant's first salvo launched. Crude plasma missiles wrapped in electromagnetic shells, manually guided. They didn't track like alien tech. They weren't beautiful. But they hit. One Zix interceptor spun out, crashing into its twin before both lit up the sky like twin stars being born. Callan gritted his teeth. Fire everything. Send the dagger our greeting. And just like that, the void lit up. Humanity wasn't dying quietly. They were setting the stars on fire. The dagger didn't flinch. It just sat there, impossibly large, its blackened hull soaking up the light from the battle like it wanted to be ignored. It was arrogance, plain and raw. That was how the Zix operated. They didn't dodge. They didn't hide. They believed they were beyond fear. Callan Ward was about to teach them otherwise. Inside the remnant, red lights strobed through the bridge as the ship buckled slightly under recoil from its second barrage. Luma barked out readings from the tactical screen, her voice sharp and clear despite the chaos. Enemy shields holding. We scored damage on their outer escort line, but the dagger's core hasn't flinched. Callan's jaw tightened. Status on the Widow's load? Rix leaned forward, checking the separate transmission feed. The mining rig is moving. AI reports 80% chance of successful detonation if we get it close enough. But their anti-boarding protocols will kick in once it breaches 500 clicks. Callan nodded. Then we'll get them looking the other way. The plan was reckless, desperate, exactly what made it human. The Widow's load was a barely held-together asteroid hauler strapped with the remains of a neutron core, a bomb so dangerous it could collapse its own hull if mishandled. There wasn't a guidance AI powerful enough to fly it past the dagger's defenses, so they didn't use an AI. They used Elias Brand, a smuggler-turned-freedom fighter who once flew through a solar flare to steal a Zix beacon relay. Now, his last mission was to guide the Widow into the dagger's gut and blow them both into myth. He came through the comms now, his voice light, almost laughing. "Tell me, Commander, how many statues do I get if this works?" Callan allowed himself the thinnest smile. "Just one, and I'll make sure it's ugly." "That's perfect." Elias replied. "I'd hate to attract pigeons." The comms cut off as the Widow's load changed course, dropping into stealth approach, its fusion thrusters silent. Meanwhile, the rest of the fleet surged forward. This was the distraction. "Bring us into flanking position," Callan ordered. "If they're watching us, they're not watching him." The remnant veered hard, engines groaning. Beside it, the last remaining Earth warbird, CNS Bladefall, opened fire, venting everything it had. The blast lit up the void, striking against the dagger's shields and causing a ripple in the massive ship's energy field. For the first time, the dagger reacted. Its lower hull turned, slowly, like some great beast noticing a mosquito on its back. Energy beams flared to life, cutting across space in terrifying precision. One struck the Bladefall dead center. Callan watched the screen. No. Too late. The Bladefall cracked in half, venting crew and steel into the darkness. There were no screams, just silence. 42 crew, Luma said softly. Gone. Callan clenched the railing in front of him until his knuckles went white. Keep firing. The remnant fired again, this time launching a burst of modified EMP torpedoes. The blasts weren't meant to destroy, they were meant to blind. One exploded near the dagger's targeting lens, and for a split second, the massive ship's weapons paused. That was all Elias needed. From the blackness behind the dagger, the Widow's load emerged, crawling silently forward. No lights, no heat signature. It looked like debris. It was debris, until it wasn't. He came through the fleet's comms one last time. See you on the other side, Commander. Callan didn't answer. He just stood there, eyes fixed on the target, heart beating slow and cold. The Widow's load hit the dagger's underbelly at full speed. The detonation was unnatural. It didn't explode in fire. It collapsed, like the space around it folded in on itself. The dagger's hull bent, twisted, and cracked like glass being crushed by a god's hand. Then the shockwave came. The remnant spun off course, alarms screaming. Crew members were flung into walls, emergency dampeners struggling to keep up. Callan hit the ground hard, blood in his mouth. "Damage report!" he shouted, forcing himself up. "Shields at 30%! We lost Deck 3! Luma yelled back. But she was smiling, because outside the dagger was no longer whole. A third of its body was gone, just vanished. The rest of it sputtered, a wounded animal, its main power grid flickering in and out. And then something impossible happened. It ran. The dagger retreated. "Holy shit!" Rix whispered. "We made it bleed." "No," Callan said, dragging himself to his feet, eyes burning. "We made it afraid." The silence after the dagger retreated was louder than any explosion. Across the bridge of the remnant, no one spoke. They didn't cheer. They didn't celebrate. They just watched as the massive Zix warship limped through slipspace, leaving behind trails of debris, flickering energy, and the broken bodies of its dead. It was the first time in known galactic history that a Zix flagship had fled. Callan Ward stood at the center of it all, barely steady on his feet. Blood ran from a cut above his brow. His uniform was torn. His voice, when he spoke, came out low and hoarse. "Status." Luma wiped her face with her sleeve, checked the panel and said, "We lost 3 ships, the Bladeful, the Hauler twins, 47 souls gone. Elias—" Her voice cracked just slightly. "No sign of him, nothing left." Callan nodded once, eyes on the sensor map. "And the dagger?" "Gone. Left the sector with most of its outer hull breached, no counterattack detected." Rix let out a low whistle. "They'll come back, pissed off, with reinforcements. You know that, right?" "Yeah," Callan said, steady. "And we'll be ready." That was the thing about humans. You could punch them, bleed them, burn their homes and call them vermin. But once they got up, really got up, there was no force in the stars that could put them down again. They had just shattered the myth of Zix invincibility. That wasn't just a tactical win. It was a narrative shift, a psychological earthquake. And in war, that was sometimes even more dangerous than a fleet. The message was out now. Humans don't run. And when they hit back, they make sure you never forget it. Still, survival wasn't guaranteed. Callan knew it. The fleet was limping. They had no backup, no allies. Earth itself was barely holding on. The surface was fractured between city-states, bunker towns, and nomadic tech clans. Every remaining nation was just a name etched in cracked stone. But none of that mattered if they had time. "Tell the fleet to regroup," Callan said. "I want full diagnostics on all ships. We'll patch what we can and scrap the rest." Rick scratched his beard. "Where to next?" "Venus Orbital Station," Callan replied. "There's a weapons lab there that never got evacuated. If it's still intact, it could be the key to building actual defense infrastructure." "And if it's not?" Luma asked. "Then we take whatever we can carry and move. We keep fighting. That's it. That's all we do now." As the fleet limped away from the battlefield, the Zix response began to ripple across the galaxy. In deep space outposts, Zix commanders argued behind closed doors. Their logic-based minds struggled with the concept of retreat. Fear, human unpredictability. They had underestimated emotion. Again. Other alien empires were watching too. The Varen, who had long assumed humans were just stubborn pests, now debated whether to initiate diplomatic contact. The Haloks, who traded information for technology, began scouring ancient human war archives. The Gren Confederacy, neutral for centuries, quietly upgraded its own shields. And in the middle of it all, Earth, scarred, battered, defiant, became a warning to the stars. On board the Remnant, as the engines stabilized, Callan walked alone into the memorial chamber. It was small, just a black wall with names etched into it, lit by a single beam of artificial light. He reached out and pressed a button. A new name appeared, freshly carved by laser: Elias Brand, pilot of the Widow. He stood there a moment longer, then stepped away. In war, heroes didn't get graves. They got silence, memory, and a legacy written in blood and flame. The next morning, Luma brought a fresh report. "You need to see this." He followed her to the comms room, where a live transmission played from a nearby Zix border station. A panicked voice, shaky and high-pitched, translated into human audio. "To the leaders of Earth, we request, parley. Do not strike again." Callan listened quietly. Then he leaned into the comm panel. "Let me make something clear," he said. "We didn't strike you. We warned you. What you saw was restraint." He stared into the dark screen. "Push again, and we won't erase your ship." He leaned forward, voice ice cold. "We'll erase your species." Then he cut the signal, because diplomacy ends where survival begins. The days that followed were strangely quiet. No Zix scouts, no probes, no retaliatory fleets screaming out of slipspace. Just silence across the stars, the kind that didn't bring comfort but dread, like the stillness before a second wave, the kind of silence that whispered, "They're watching, planning, bleeding." Callan Ward didn't trust it for a second. Inside the remnant, repairs continued around the clock. Half the fleet's mechanics were either dead or sleep-deprived to the edge of collapse. Shield relays sparked constantly, hull panels bent out of shape refused to seal, and life support fluctuated like a stubborn heart monitor. But the ship moved. It breathed, just like Earth. Venus Orbital Station appeared in the distance after a 6-hour drift through low radiation fields. The station looked intact, mostly. Its outer rings were coated in ash, and several research bays were blown out into open space. But the central tower still glowed with artificial life. As the remnant approached, Luma tightened her grip on the navigation controls. "Scans show minimal radiation. Life support still running down there. You think someone could still be alive?" Callan shook his head. "Doubt it. But they may have left something worth more than life. Weapons, data, technology the old world never finished. Before the alien alliances, before Earth signed its own rights away under the guise of galactic unity, before they learned the hard way that peace with a predator is just fattening before the bite." As they docked, Callan led the first team into the airlock. Him, Luma, Rix, and 3 others. They entered with rifles raised, suits sealed. The corridors were dim, eerily untouched. Blood still painted the walls in faded smears. But no bodies. They found the labs 2 decks down, still active behind emergency blast doors. "Manual override," Callan said. Rix knelt by the panel and started rerouting power through an old portable generator. "I don't like this," Luma muttered, glancing down the silent corridor. "Too easy, like a trap that already knows what kind of bait you like." "It is a trap," Callan said, leveling his weapon. "We're just the ones walking in with teeth now." With a loud hiss, the door slid open, and what they saw inside changed everything. A single room, lined with prototype weapons, most unrecognizable even to Rix, who'd scavenged half the quadrant. At the center stood a suspended stasis capsule. Inside it floated a human man, mid-40s, pale skin, tubes running from his chest to the base. Eyes closed. Luma blinked. "Holy shit!" A monitor flickered on. A synthetic voice, recorded long ago, began to play. "Project Bastion. Final phase. Human Enhancement Protocol authorized. Subject, Dr. Kyle Moran. Weaponized cognition. A eye-fused neural capacity. Potentially unstable." Rix whistled. "They built a goddamn hybrid." Callan stepped closer. studying the capsule. Cale's body was unchanged, no cybernetic limbs, no visible implants. But the neural scans told a different story. His brainwaves pulsed at double the normal rate, with spikes of pattern recognition far beyond human norm. They were trying to make someone who could think faster than a Zix command hive. Luma said, reading the data aloud. A mind that could predict attack patterns before they even happened. Why didn't they use him? Rix asked. Callan stared at the warning across the side of the pod. Do not activate without full galactic clearance. Potential threat level. Extinction. They were afraid. Callan said. But Earth didn't have the luxury of fear anymore. Wake him. Luma hesitated. You sure about that? No. Callan said. But we don't win the next war by being careful. We win it by being terrifying. The stasis pod hissed, slowly draining. The man inside shifted, his fingers twitching first, then his eyes. Bright, piercing, aware. Kyle Moran opened his mouth, breathing deeply for the first time in over a decade. Then, calmly, he asked, Which empire needs erasing? Kyle Moran didn't move like a man just pulled from stasis. He didn't stumble, didn't ask for water, didn't blink at the flood of data now streaming into his mind from the tactical uplink Callan had given him. He simply stood, still composed and terrifyingly alert, like he'd only been asleep with one eye closed. Callan studied him carefully. How much do you remember? Cale's voice was quiet, but there was something sharp beneath it, something engineered. Enough to know the Zix are still afraid of one thing. And what's that? Kyle turned to face him. Us, when we stop pretending we're civilized. The lab around them flickered as backup power began to fade. The station was collapsing in slow motion, systems failing one by one, lights dimming like dying stars. They had maybe 2 hours before they'd need to evacuate. Kyle didn't care. He walked over to one of the prototype consoles and slid his hand across the interface. It responded like it knew him, booting up secure logs, encrypted weapon schematics, and old Earth black site communications from the pre-Unity days. Tell me what's left of Earth, Kyle said without turning. Callan hesitated. Pockets. Underground cities, bunker colonies, a few skyborne settlements still functional over Asia and the northern wastes. No central government, just scattered resistance. And how many still remember what we used to be? Too many. That's why they're afraid to hope again. Kyle finally turned around. Then we give them something better than hope. We give them fear. Callan's eyes narrowed. Fear. Cale approached the main holographic projector and activated a deep scan of the sector. The map showed not just Zix fleet positions, but hidden relay beacons, forgotten transmission paths, dark matter engine trails. Things no one had access to. Things Kyle shouldn't know. Rix's eyes went wide. That's not public intel. That's black-level clearance. Kyle nodded calmly. I had access to Project Bastion's entire archive. They built me to see threats before they arrived. I can still access the Zix war frequencies. Their hive link isn't encrypted the way they think it is. Luma blinked. You mean you can read their fleet movements? More than that, Kyle said. I can anticipate them. If you give me command authority, I can intercept them before they even leave their stations. Callan crossed his arms. And what do you want in return? Kyle smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. I want revenge. Silence stretched between them. Then Callan said, You'll have it. But understand this, we're not building a new empire. We're not doing this for conquest. This is about survival. Kyle turned back to the console. For you, maybe. But survival and vengeance can walk the same road. Callan didn't like it, but he didn't stop it either. Because deep down, he knew this was exactly what humanity had become. Not the saviors, not the diplomats, just survivors with sharp teeth. Within the hour, Kale had uploaded the core defense algorithms into the Remnant. Every ship in the fleet now pulsed with predictive combat software, allowing them to engage with a level of timing that mimicked Zik's battle swarms, only faster. That night, Callan stood alone in his quarters, staring out at the broken stars. He had sent the first threat. Now Kale would be the one to make it real. A soft beep at the door drew his attention. Luma entered, holding a datapad. "You need to see this," she said quietly. He took it from her and scanned the message. His chest tightened. It was a direct transmission. Zik's code, intercepted by Kyle's implants. Translation: Initiate Fleet Omega. Earth will burn. Humanity ends now. Beneath it was a number, a timer, 11 days. "Guess we poked the nest," Rix muttered from behind. Callan handed the pad back and looked out the window. "They think they're ending us, but we're not the same species they burned the first time." He paused. "They're not coming to end humanity. They're coming to meet it." The countdown began like a storm cloud you could feel in your bones. 11 days. That was all Earth had before the Ziks unleashed Fleet Omega, their extinction protocol. No negotiations, no demands, just fire, void, and erasure. And they weren't bluffing this time. Callan Ward stood on the observation deck of the Remnant, eyes locked on the planet below. Earth, battered and bleeding, spun quietly in the dark. From up here, the scars weren't visible. The nuclear deserts, the broken cities, the oceans poisoned by Zik's harvesters. You had to squint to see the damage. But Callan didn't need to squint. He remembered it. Behind him, Kyle Moran entered the deck silently, his steps deliberate. The hybrid's presence carried an energy now, something unspoken, sharp, like the air just before lightning. "They're amassing at Sector D0, Kyle said without prompt. 67 war cruisers, 32 sub-hive carriers, 1 dread-tier superweapon. It'll reach us in 10 days, 22 hours. "And you're sure about that?" Callan asked, not turning around. Kyle didn't blink. "I've already begun disrupting their command lattice. It'll stall their sync for a day, maybe 2, but they'll adapt. I can't outthink them forever." Callan finally turned, eyes narrow. "Then we hit first." Kyle smiled thinly. "That's the difference between you and them, Commander. You strike to survive. I strike to educate." In the coming hours, the fleet was mobilized, not just to defend, but to launch the unthinkable. Operation Ashfall, a full-blown preemptive assault on the Zik's command chain. It wasn't about wiping out the entire fleet. That was impossible. It was about cutting the head off the swarm, crippling their coordination, making them bleed just enough to level the field when the final battle hit Earth. And for that, they needed allies, even the ones who had once turned their backs. Callan opened comms with the last surviving human enclaves, bunker states, orbital survivors, fractured colonies floating in the asteroid belts. Every one of them had once believed Earth was already dead. Not anymore. The message was broadcast everywhere. "We are not asking you to save us. We are asking you to make the bastards regret they ever looked our way. You want peace? Earn it with us. You want freedom? Fight for it with us. Because if Earth burns, it won't go quietly. It'll take stars with it." And they came. Old mining rigs turned into gunships, pirate raiders strapping scrap cannons onto civilian haulers, eye ghosts riding ancient satellites, even Mars-born exiles who once swore never to return. One by one, they rejoined the species they'd abandoned. The last stand wasn't just going to be on Earth, it was going to be everywhere. But the Ziks saw it too, and they weren't idle. 4 days before the countdown ended, a massive blast wave ruptured through deep space. A human supply convoy, 12 ships, gone without warning. Callan received the footage. He watched it once, then deleted it. "We're not showing this to the fleet," he said coldly. "Fear is useful, hopelessness isn't." But even Kale was quieter after that. The final piece fell into place when Luma broke through the old orbital defense network above New Asia. What she found was buried in a forgotten server cluster beneath the Himalayas. A prototype weapon. Something Earth's governments had designed as a last resort, but never had the nerve to use. The Spear Protocol, a solar-piercing rail platform capable of firing a kinetic lance at near light speed. One shot, one use, but enough to destroy anything, even the Zix Dread Tier weapon en route. Callan stood over the ancient console, fingers hovering. "Activate it," he said. "Target their core ship. We'll give them a message they'll never forget." Luma nodded. "It won't be subtle. It's not meant to be." As the console booted up, a voice crackled through the ancient speaker array. Female, robotic, stern. Spear Protocol armed, awaiting planetary authorization. Callan pressed his palm against the reader. Confirmed. Firing solution locked. Estimated time to impact, T-4 days. The weapon was primed. The trap was set. And far beyond Earth, the Zix fleet, cold, calculating, merciless, accelerated. Straight into it. The sky cracked open. At first it was silent, just a faint distortion above Earth, like the air itself was trembling in fear. Then came the sound, a low, rising hum that deepened into a roar as the Spear Protocol ignited. From its hidden cradle beneath the Himalayan crust, the rail platform unfolded like the jaws of a buried god. Energy surged through ancient circuits. Power bled into the mountain. Then it fired. A lance of concentrated kinetic force, accelerated to near light speed, split the atmosphere in half, ripping clouds apart and bending light around it. The shot didn't burn. It didn't explode. It simply obliterated anything in its path. And in its path was the Zix Dread Tier warship. One moment it was there, a towering juggernaut of black alloy and hive pulse reactors. The next, it was gone. Not shattered, not disabled, gone, vaporized into cosmic dust. The stars fell silent. On the ground, in bunkers, ships, craters, and broken cities, humanity held its breath. The Zix fleet stalled. Thousands of warships, each built with unfeeling precision, each designed to wipe civilizations off the galactic map, hesitated. And that was all Earth needed. The remnant led the charge, its engines screaming, shields barely holding. Callan Ward stood at the helm, teeth clenched, eyes focused. Cale Morin was beside him, connected to the ship's neural interface, skin pale with strain, but mind calculating faster than any computer. "Strike their flanks," Kyle ordered. "They're rerouting drones to compensate for command loss. Hit them where they're still thinking." Fleet Omega broke formation, fractured by fear, by confusion, by the realization that the apes they once enslaved had just punched a hole through their strongest god. And Earth didn't stop. From behind the moon came the Grave Mind, a carrier once abandoned during the first wave of the war, now restored by Martian exiles and carrying half the surviving plasma artillery from the old world. It struck hard, flanking the right wing of the Zix fleet and cutting through like rusted knives through silk. Callan barked orders. "Divide and bleed them. Cale, scramble their targeting again." Cale didn't reply. His eyes were closed. A thin stream of blood ran from his nose. "Cale." "I'm busy breaking an empire," he whispered. In his mind, Cale had infiltrated the Zix hive net, a digital consciousness that governed their coordination. It was beautiful, cold, orderly. And now he was poisoning it. He flooded their network with paradoxes, emotional logic loops, fragments of human memory. A child's scream, a mother's last breath, a burning skyline, pain. The Zix had never understood it, never needed to, but now it infected their code. Their ships hesitated, their drones spun in circles, command paths flickered and vanished, and then Earth hit them with everything. From orbit, rail cannons spat metal hell. From the ground, modified defense satellites launched EMP bursts. On every front, humans attacked with rage, with hate, with the memory of what had been done to them. And they won. One by one, Zix ships fell, either to fire or to failure. The remnant dove through wreckage, plasma cannons glowing white-hot, engines on the brink of collapse. "Shields at 4%! Luma shouted from her console. "Push through!" Callan roared. "We end this!" In the distance, the Zix command ship, a secondary dreadnought, their fallback, tried to retreat. But Kale was waiting. "I told you," he whispered through the net. "Strike once more and we'll erase you." He locked their engine trajectory in a recursive loop, then crashed their navigation AI against its own logic. The ship imploded, folding inward like it was embarrassed to exist. By hour 6 of the battle, silence fell again. Real silence this time. All Zix ships gone, either destroyed or fleeing into the dark, where no stars dared watch. The war wasn't over, not entirely, but Earth had survived. More than that, it had won. On the bridge, no one spoke at first, just heavy breaths, bleeding hands, wide, stunned eyes. Then Rix laughed, a deep, broken, beautiful sound. "We did it?" Luma sat down on the floor, tears streaking soot across her face. "Holy shit, we did it?" Kyle disconnected from the interface and collapsed. Callan caught him. "You all right?" he asked. Kyle blinked slowly. "Number. But neither are they." Outside, the stars shimmered. Earth was broken, tired, but standing. And the message that had started it all, broadcast across every surviving frequency, now carried new weight. "Strike once more, we'll erase you." And this time, the galaxy believed it.